Chileans head to the polls for primary elections to choose their presidential candidates for November's general elections. Hundreds of people have died and many others are still missing in Europe's recent floods. And at least 20 people have been killed by landslides in India's most populous city, Mumbay. Hello and welcome to TeleSUR. I'm Jose Daniel Lopez in Quito, Ecuador, and this is from the south. We begin in Cuba, where thousands of government and Communist Party supporters have taken to the streets across the country to defend democracy and support the political model on the Caribbean nation. President Miguel Díaz-Canel and Cuban leaders have also joined the demonstrations in the capital Havana on Saturday, where thousands of participants, mostly young people, emphasized the role of the United States sanctions and the harsh economic restrictions, which have caused the worst crisis on the island in decades.
These riots, like last Sunday's events, happen when weak-minded people let themselves be influenced, so we are here to show that this is not the Cuban youth. Cuban youth think a little more. That's why I'm here.
In Mexico, a mass rally was held outside the Cuban embassy in the capital, Mexico City, to support the political stability of Cuba and to reject the U.S. blockade against the Caribbean nation.
Our support is more for the revolution. We know that there are shortages of medicine and food in various parts of the country, but this is thanks to the blockade that the United States has maintained against Cuba.
Since the triumph of the Cuban Revolution, I think it has shown us that everything Cuba has done has been for the benefit of humanity and the people who need it. And the Cuban medical brigades are proof of that.
In Chile, left and right-wing demonstrators have clashed during a march in defense of the Cuban Revolution. The demonstrators of both groups took place in front of the Cuban embassy in the capital, Santiago. Right-wing sectors sparked violence and confrontation, while revolutionary groups demanded an end to the blockade imposed by the U.S. on the island for more than 60 years. Left-wing activists denounced that the White House is carrying out an international strategy to overthrow democratic governments that do not comply with their political interests. And Chileans head to the polls at the primary elections to choose the presidential candidates for general elections on November 21st. Voters will choose between two main political coalitions, the left-center Approved Dignity Coalition and the right-center Go Chile Alliance. The two frontrunners in the race for the Approved Dignity candidacy are former student leader Gabriel Boric and Communist Party representative and mayor of Recoleta, Daniel Jaude. Former mayor of Santiago, Joaquín Lavín, heads the race for the Go Chile Alliance Party. The Venezuelan president Nicolás Maduro has denounced terrorist groups financed by former Venezuelan politicians and supported by the U.S. and Colombian governments who had plans to assassinate him.
We have defeated the Bogotá Axis, Miami, Madrid in one of their plans. They bet. There is evidence that this terrorist group is politically supported by a group of former members, by a group of right-wing politicians, and financed from Bogotá, from Miami, from Madrid, directed through telephone system to attack, kill. They call it that the party started. The party in Caracas has already been known. Part had plans to assassinate me. How can you call criminals of this type who put their snipers to shoot at the highway? Cars that were passing and killed taxi drivers and innocent people who were passing by the highway Caracas-La Guaira, the Cementerio address, the Paraíso address. As you can call people like this who had groups ready to set fire and attack the city, have only one qualification: murderers and terrorists, and you gave him a great defeat. Congratulations on his rise and continue in combat.
The interim Prime Minister of Haiti, Claude Joseph, has denounced attempts to divert the attention on investigations on the assassination of President Jovenel Moïse. Joseph said there are many clues about the assassination of the president and that the investigations are still underway to expose the main person behind the murder. He added that the security forces will not stop working to bring those responsible to justice. Following the assassination last week, the interim Prime Minister Josep declared himself in charge and said the country will be under a temporary state of siege. And Haiti has started a general vaccine rollout on Saturday after health workers and senior citizens were vaccinated the day before. Hospital University of Peace is heading the vaccination campaign under the supervision of Haiti's health ministry. Earlier this week, Haiti received the first donation of the first vaccine batch of Moderna as part of the donation to the COVAX program. Haiti has reported more than 19,300 confirmed coronavirus cases and more than 480 deaths, amid the biggest wave of COVID-19 cases since the pandemic began.
Yes, I see that we have started well. We have made awareness where we the staff and went to the clinics not associated with a hospital to explain what the disease is and how to protect patients against it.
More news in a minute, stay with us. Welcome back. Heavy rains experienced in several Western European countries have triggered calls for urgent action on addressing climate change. The World Meteorological Organization has reported that Belgium, Germany, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands received rainfall equivalent to 2 months of rain in just 2 days. At least 180 people have been reported killed from the floods in Western Europe.
We need to step up climate action. We need to step up the level of ambition. We're not doing nearly enough to stay, within the targets of the Paris Agreement and keep temperatures below 2 degrees Celsius, even 1.5 degrees Celsius by the end of this century. The Gulf of Finland in the Baltic Sea is record warm, according to researchers at the Finnish Meteorological Institute, up to 26.6 degrees Celsius on the 14th of July. So that's the warmest recorded temperature of the waters since records began.
In Germany, rescue workers have toiled to clear up the damage laid by water on Saturday as the death toll from the flooding in Western Europe rose about 180. Police said more than 90 people have died in Western Germany's Ahrweiler County, one of the worst hit areas, and more casualties are feared. Another 43 people were confirmed dead in neighboring Rhode Island Palatinate state, Germany's most populous.
In the background, we are hearing trucks being pulled out of the water. 28 vehicles have been reported here that were underwater, though in the meantime the water went down a bit. We don't know if there are any persons inside those cars, but we hope that everyone managed to get out.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel has expressed horror at the surreal devastation of floods as she visited the area of CHILE, Western Germany. She also called for an acceleration of the fight against climate change.
I have come here today and especially to Schultz with the Prime Minister to make it clear that we on a federal side naturally want to get a real picture of the shell assay, surreal, ghastly situation. This summer, with all the events we are experiencing in Germany, as well as the precipitation we are currently experiencing, show, if you believe the science, which I do, that it has something to do with climate change. There are also very interesting explanatory models that describe why such cases of concentrated rain in one place occur, and that means we have to do even more.
Meanwhile, thousands of residents of the affected areas of southern Netherlands have been allowed to return home on Saturday morning after being evacuated due to severe flooding. Prime Minister Mark Rutte's government has declared the flooding a state of emergency, opening up national funds for those affected.
The entire basement was flooded, and the damage is probably in the tens of thousands of euros. Apart from the emotional value, which I find more important, magazines, radio bulletins from
Gracias, mi vida.
1960
Esta semana
until
igual hay una cantidad de textos que ya
1997.
incluso
All
hasta mañana van a salir 5, porque es que todo es importante, todo se tiene que publicar. Entonces, bueno, mira, saldrán 5 aunque uno no esté en el home. Porque a mí se me había olvidado el texto de Van Station que mandó Joel. Que nada, no podemos seguir esperando porque eso fue el día 16. Entonces lo voy a sacar mañana, pero bueno, ese no quedará en el home. Pero me alegra que mandes estos porque a lo mejor hay textos que se caen a lo largo de la semana y bueno, estos me sirven de respaldo. Viste que ninguno de los dos textos, ninguno de los dos películas, ni la de la película del sábado ni la de espectador crítico fueron las que anunciamos. Yo de verdad no sé, yo creo que yo pararía de anunciar películas hasta que se estabilice la programación porque esto es un relajo y entonces es pasando pena. Y lo otro es que no he ido al casino a sacar los mandados, así que ahora mismo no tengo azúcar. Cuando vaya y los busque yo te aviso. ¿Él quiere prieta o blanca?
France says Saturday it will require people not fully vaccinated and arriving from some European countries to show a negative COVID-19 test taken within the previous 24 hours.
I ask that people be given the freedom to choose whether or not they want to be vaccinated. No more and no less. A return to something that is constitutional. I am not opposed to the vaccine. If people want to get vaccinated, great.
I really feel like we are starting to infringe on everyone's freedom. I don't think we should have two opposite groups, the vaccinated and the non-vaccinated.
Bueno, imagínate que de No Matarás, yo te lo comenté que ya yo lo había indicado a Indira que hiciera una crítica y ya Daniel me la había mandado, o sea, tenía dos potenciales trabajos ahí. Pero bueno, a Indira le dije que hiciera una de estas que pusieran ahora, que yo ni la vi, creo que era una cosa en plan para de piñazo, pero bueno, que la haga porque esta semana está un poco floja de texto respecto a ella y quiero que escriba.
Lower rates of the virus than the UK, where the highly contagious Delta variant is driving a surge in infections. The French tourist industry has rejected this resolution.
I think it's a disaster. I think they should stop this whole thing. It's ridiculous now. We've got to live with the virus. We've got to learn. It's a new thing. It's not going to go away.
Disappointing because I'm double vaccinated and I thought that as of Monday it would be alright and I'd be able to come back and not have to self-isolate.
Catalan firefighters have battled to contain a wildfire at the national park of Cap Creus in Girona, 2 hours away from Barcelona. Local media reported that 200 people had to be evacuated from their houses as flames approached residential areas. The area is a natural paradise attracting many tourists, especially during the summer. According to the regional authorities, over 400 hectares have already been lost to the wildfire.
This morning, we went to the market of Porto de la Selva. We finished shopping, then we went to have something to drink as usual. And when we were having coffee, we began seeing the smoke around 1 o'clock, and we saw the helicopters with the water. This morning, when we were at the beach, we saw a bit of smoke and then just smoke from the left and right. Since 1 o'clock and until now, totally out of control.
The world's top oil producers have agreed to boost output from August 2021. The Vienna-based group OPEC issued a statement after a meeting announced that they have agreed to raise output by 400,000 barrels per day each month, starting in August, to help in the global economic recovery as the pandemic eases. The group also said it will set assets market developments in December, and the deal also extends a deadline on capping output from April 2022 to the end of the year.
So yes, we will keep the 400 on a monthly basis. We will review in December. We kept our window open for review.
And we have more stories coming up after one last break, so stay tuned. Welcome back. At least 13 people have been killed and many others seriously burned after a fuel tanker exploded in western Kenya. The incident happened while residents of Malaga village in Kenya's Saya County were extracting fuel from a tanker after it was involved in an accident. This tragic event is not the first one to happen in Kenya. In 2009, at least 120 people were killed after a huge crowd descended on an overturned gasoline tanker, which then blew up. The Rwandan capital, Kigali, has been placed under a 15-day lockdown as the country battles a second wave of coronavirus. The country's health officials have announced that all movements outside homes in the capital will not require an approved permit from the police, except for essential service providers. Rwanda's hospitals have been overwhelmed with rising COVID-19 cases and are faced with a critical shortage of beds and medicines. The new restrictions will last until July 21st.
During these 10 days, what we are going to do is fight strongly for ourselves, even if the living situation will be bad. But we have to accept the change and protect ourselves, like washing our hands, wearing a mask, observing a social distancing. When those 10 days are done, we will go back to normal.
African leaders have called on the World Bank to prioritize fundings towards COVID-19 vaccines and economic recovery. Moussa Faki, chairman of the Africa Union Commission, called for the reconstructing day payments to struggling African countries. He said this during a meeting aimed at discussing World Bank aid plans for African countries over the next 3 years.
Much remains to be done to overcome this crisis, which, as we are seeing these days, is global with several cycles. Indeed, less than 3% of the total population of Africa has received a first dose of vaccines compared to about 54% in the US and the EU.
We will never tire of calling for urgent debt restructuring, accompanied by a bold policy that goes beyond special entitlements, to alleviate the pressing need for immediate cash for vaccine purchase and to lay the foundations for economic recovery.
The World Health Organization has warned that COVID-19 cases are rising in Africa. The organization said there are growing concerns that some hospitals across the continent might get overwhelmed by the pandemic.
Over the past month, Africa recorded an additional 1 million cases. This is the shortest time it's taken so far to add 1 million cases. Comparatively, it took around 3 months to move from 4 million to 5 million cases. This COVID-19 resurgence is the fastest a continent has seen. New cases have increased for the 8th consecutive week, and 18 African countries are now in resurgence. The Delta variant, which is currently the most transmissible of all the variants, has been detected in 21 countries in Africa. There is a consistent upward trend in 12 countries with sharp increases in some, such as Algeria, Malawi, Senegal, and Zimbabwe.
Mauritius has opened its borders to international travelers after months of isolation. Phase 1 of the reopening of the borders for the island allows vaccinated guests to stay in one of the country's resorts. Travelers to Mauritius are required to undergo a PCR test 7 days before the departure, and a negative result is required to enter the island. Vaccinated travelers are also required to have a PCR test on arrival at the airport. Residents in South Africa have cleaned up shopping centers and stores, looting during a week of shocking violence that rocked the country and left more than 200 people dead. Aid organizations also handed out food in communities that had been cut off from main roads or where food shops were ransacked in the unrest. The violence, the worst in the post-apartheid South Africa, erupted after former President Jacob Zuma was sentenced to 15 months in jail for snubbing a corruption inquiry. His successor, President Cyril Ramaphosa, said the riots were a coordinated and well-planned attack on the country's young democracy.
Yeah, it shows you the two sides of South Africa, the bad side and the good side. First of all, those people who were looting and burning stuff, those arsonists, they are bad people in the community. But now this then tells you, this then shows you that not all is lost. So the world is looking at us with those eyes, but we want to tell them that South Africa has a lot of good people and we have a lot of good stories to tell. And if people and communities work together, everything or anything can be achieved. My prayer is that this unity that is being showed here will not cease after we go back to normalcy.
At least 5 people have been killed in a bombing attack in Syria's Idlib region. A Syrian war monitor has reported that the bombing by government troops took place in a village in the last rebel-held enclave. Violence has been rising in recent weeks as the Syrian government continues fighting towards restoring control of the territory. According to the United Nations, more than 500 children were killed in Syria last year. The Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has been sworn in for a 4th term. The swearing-in ceremony was held at the presidential palace and attended by members of parliament, political figures, and army officers. Assad won 95% of votes in elections held on May 26. He was first elected by referendum in 2000, following the death of his father, Hafez al-Assad, who had ruled Syria for 30 years. Still in Syria, the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has arrived in capital Damascus on a state visit. The Chinese minister was received by Foreign Minister Baisal Maikat and later met with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad and government officials. The two countries enjoy mutual cooperation, which has seen China invest in Syria's several industries, which includes construction, car manufacturing, and telecommunications. Representatives of the Afghan government and the Taliban have met in Qatar's capital Doha to resume talks as fighting between the two groups continues. Several high-ranking officials and negotiators from the Taliban's political office in Doha met at a hotel for the talks, anticipated to bring a lasting solution to the war. The talks resume at a time when the Taliban continue gaining ground in Afghanistan. Several countries have in recent days evacuated their citizens from the war-torn country due to the intensified fighting. And Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has described the United States mission in Afghanistan as a failure, as Taliban make gains at a time when foreign countries pull the remaining troops from the Asian nation.
The Americans left, as President Biden confirmed, because they considered their mission to be accomplished. Of course, he tried to paint it in the most positive colors, but everyone understands that the mission failed. We are not interested in chaos being established there. Not only because we do not want it to spread to the neighboring countries friendly to us, but also because we sincerely wish well to the people of Afghanistan.
And we come to the end of this news brief, but remember you can find this and many other stories in our website, as always, in telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.